gonna hit record over here.
Here we are.
And that means we're live. We're live.
We did it.
We did it. We're live. Finally.
Here's another show with Condry's talking.
Another show. We made it. On that note.
Yes.
So this one, what? Because it's always like the late night frantic shit that when we text, I'm like, what are we gonna talk about? This one, we talked about how many different subjects that we ran
talked
through.
about a few, and I didn't have anything to really say anything about. All right, so yeah, let's talk about what we were going to talk about. The first one we were going to talk about was like technology, and it gets to the point where technology is so advanced that it's almost like magic, and then so that was
what this is, they're teasers for future episodes. But ultimately, we decided. We decided at what was it, like maybe an hour ago, 2 hours ago?
Not even.
We're just like, fuck it, we're going to talk about something that you know what you're talking about.
It was like 30 minutes.
30 minutes. But here's the beauty, is it's something that I know we've had a lot of conversations about.
It's something that's important to me.
Well, it's important to you, and it's fun, you know. It's cool to talk about, and it's the idea of history, right?
Yeah, my major.
Your major, yeah. Believe it or not, something.
The thing that I'm currently several $1,000s in debt and getting is that bachelor. Oh, that's not even that bad. So most people are they're in like the 20,000 range if they went to like a private school.
It's that much money?
Yo, yeah, I'm not even that bad off.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, so the thing is, and this is one of the ones that always gets me is we were on our way down to LA, I think.
Okay.
One of the first, was it LA? We were driving somewhere. And you explained, like, we were talking about how crazy times are, like, politically.
Oh, yeah.
You know? And it's like, it seems, because to me, I see, like, people dividing crazy. You know? And my whole idea is, like, stay center of the road and you're pretty cool. You start going one way or another and shit gets real crazy. And, basically, you're like, but right now, as a historian, this is, like, a prime time to pay attention.
Yeah, definitely.
Because of all the tensions. You know, like, so here's what I saw. I think it was a meme, and it's the history books. You know how there's the map with a bunch of arrows on it?
Yeah.
Right before shit goes down? It feels like we're in that part with a bunch of arrows. Right?
Oh, yeah, it's almost like on a timeline, this is where, like, all, like, the event shit would be happening. No, this is definitely, like, I think there's a lot of important events. There's just a lot of change going on right now. Like, I mean, I'm a history major, but also I studied, like, political science, and I was studying a lot of my poli-sci classes were in, like, 2015. And it's funny, like, everything that we learned is, like, the political norm. Like I feel like in 2016, all that went out, like, the door. Like, it was almost like everything that we thought was, like, normal is just, like, not even normal anymore. So, yeah, it's a really interesting time for academics. There's going to be a lot of, like, articles published on all that stuff. And a lot of academics are probably going to make a pretty penny, like, writing about it.
Yeah, well, about the crazy shit that's going on. And so that's the thing that always gets me, because for me, as not a historian of any sort, but what I
took a history class, though.
I took a history class.
We took a history class.
Okay,
and we'll be talking about that later tonight.
Fuck the whole teaser thing. We're just going to talk. But the idea is, so that history class was awesome. All right? And I think we talked about the jackass history.
Have we talked about him on the show
So
before?
our professor in history was he like 5'2" or something? He was super short, wasn't he?
Shorter than you, which is like saying something.
Short as shit, yeah. But he always wore soccer jerseys, right? But he was really jacked too.
Yeah.
Like he was a rock. But he was the shortest black dude on campus. Remember, he would always say that. That was his joke. He's like, you can find me, I'm easy to find. I'm the shortest black guy around. And he was really short. Yeah. But he was like, he'd play soccer every day after school.
Yeah, he always wore like a soccer jersey to class. It was like green.
The green and yellow ones that I remember.
I forgot what his teams were, but yeah.
I don't know soccer teams.
Yeah, he would do like indoor soccer, but it's weird. And I had like another professor at Sac State who was like a bodybuilder. Like his bicep was bigger than my head.
Right.
But he was like a really good history professor too. He was a good academic in history.
Here's the thing, because you're about to become a teacher, or you're about to start doing substituting, right?
Yeah, I'm working in education right now. Like I'm an instructional aide more or less, and working in a class.
That's like a TA.
Yeah, basically, kind of like a TA. I don't just grade papers. I do work with like small groups, but I work in AV classrooms, and so like I'll work with AP US history students.
Right.
Which like. If you've been in
That's
AP
gotta be cool, right?
It's pretty cool because, like, a lot of students I work with, most students that I work with, don't like history. And so it's, like, interesting.
So it's like me.
Yeah,
It's like
but they have to do it. They have to know it.
Yeah.
So it's like it's cool because I still get to talk about it with them, and that's the leverage.
They have to listen.
I'm like, you want to pass your test? You got to listen to me talk about history.
Well, so this was like that's our class that we took together. I think did I help you at all with anything else like math or any shit, or did you just help me
No,
with
you were
history?
just a burden.
I was just a burden. All right, but that was the sole reason I passed that class was because of you, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
Like I literally sat in front of her back. I think it was in front of you, and you'd like wake me up whenever I fell asleep in class, which is
like
cool.
all the time.
Yeah.
It was an early class. Wasn't that like our first? It was like
Yeah,
I think that was like a 7:30 class.
Yeah, because I think I slept through the final or something, which seemed to be strategic because I recall missing the final, and you were in the final. Mind you, we have the same fucking last name, so I'm not sure how he didn't put that together.
Well, wait a minute, but didn't you have to like take a final later though? Because you at the time you had both of your arms broken.
Oh, that's what happened. I broke both my arms and I couldn't take the final.
So that was
the motorcycle wreck was the saving grace of that class.
Yeah, no, arguably you breaking your arms was how you passed that class.
Yeah, because I couldn't take the final like a normal person, so I had to
take it later. And so what ended up happening is I took the final and I studied for it and I worked hard for it, and I did.
I studied and worked hard for it too.
Oh, you sure did.
No, I did.
I'm saying you definitely did. And then
it was just a specified cram session where you're like this.
Yeah,
this
well, because then we sat down afterwards, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about the things that are on the test, and I'm going to give you a really focused study guide. And as we're talking about it, like, you know, there was definitely a feeling of like, oh, maybe I'm not as prepared for this, and so I just like hammered like specific information and just threw a bunch of shit.
Well, yeah, because you throw some key phrase out, and I'm like
yeah, because I literally I know the exact test that you're about to be taking.
Yeah, and
this might technically be cheating, maybe.
So
I don't know. I'm not an ethics committee.
No, well, okay, ethics committee or not, but here's the question: is what we did, all right? I graduated because of this, because I needed that history class to graduate.
Yeah.
Now, I understood the basic concepts of what happened in history, but I also, more importantly than knowing those, I know where to find the knowledge. This is kind of the important, this is what I see out of education, is knowing where to find the knowledge. So for me, I know what I'm good at.
Yeah.
I do those things that I'm good at. Now, if I don't know or I know I'm missing something, I go find somebody who is good at it. So when it comes to history, political science, all these subjects, I don't try to just bullshit my way through life with them. I go find you, and I go, hey, I have this question, and here's what I'm thinking. What's up, Willie? Like, tell me about this. And so it helps. This is the same thing I do in work. Like, it's important to know what you know and what you're good at, and do those. But then when you don't know it, go find somebody who fucking does.
Yeah. The only unfortunate thing is, like, that's not, like, history skills. I mean, but whatever. It's like, I wanted to cut you a solid, you know, on that day.
Yeah, maybe that was just, at the very least, it was really awesome. So
yeah,
that
I mean,
cool.
I definitely wouldn't help, like, any of my students in that way. It was purely like, you were my brother and you need to pass that class.
All right.
But, you know what, I'm
doing all right.
It was okay. No, I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Maybe today you don't know that the compromise that ended Reconstruction was in 1877. But on that day, on that fucking day, you did.
Yeah, well, yeah.
On that day, you sure did.
Here's the thing: Sherlock's theory of mental furniture. If it's not important, get rid of it.
You know what? Most of the time,
if it's
you
not
don't.
important to what you're doing.
Most days, you don't need to know that the compromise that ended Reconstruction was in 1877.
Yeah. Now you should know it somewhere. This is what I liked about.
But if you need to pass a final, if you need to pass a history final,
right. But here's what I like: most history professors that are good, they'll say something like, "You don't need to remember it was 1877. You just need to know it was in the 70s of 1800s or after this big thing that happened."
Yeah, mainly you need to know why it's important.
Right.
You need to know why it's relevant to that, and that's a big thing. So that's one thing that that I think that. All right. So on the topic of why people don't like history, all right.
Okay.
I think one reason why people don't like history is because they focus too much on fact memorization.
Yeah.
They think that history is just
it
memorizing
used to be
facts.
a big giant game of memory.
Yeah, because that's how they. Because honestly, we've had like a lot of shitty history teachers in the past.
Most people, I think, most kids dislike history, right?
Yeah, because they think of it as just like, oh, I need to memorize dates.
Yeah, it's a big game of memory. You know, like okay, in 1877, like what was the poem or whatever for Christopher Columbus?
Oh yeah, in 1492,
Yeah.
Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Yeah.
Right, right. And so, does it really matter that we remember exactly that year? You know,
No,
is
you
it
probably, it's
important?
not too important.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's maybe important to know that some shit happened in England that led Christopher Columbus to leaving, trying to find a better route around, because he was trying to get around to the other side of England, right?
Yeah, well,
or India.
Yeah, he was trying to find a way to get to India. England's actually not even in the picture at all. It's okay. You're not.
I'm not a historian, so
I'm not testing you on this
good.
afterwards, but
yeah. All right, sweet.
Sorry to call you out on live TV.
We're not actually on TV. This is a lot less important.
But no, it's it's not important to understand that, or it's not important to just know that Christopher Columbus, crossed the ocean in 1492. It's important to understand, like, why that's a big deal.
Right. And
Like-
so that's the question: is why? Well, I don't really care why it was. Here's the thing, though: is
I think you should,
really
because of pizza.
it wasn't pizza.
No, I'm telling you. You want to know? Do you want to know why pizza's relevant?
No. Okay, hang on. It had to do with beer, wasn't it?
Beer?
Yeah. So
Probably
this is
beer.
why India Pale Ales exist. All right. You know what the India Pale Ale is?
The Indian Pale. Yeah, I know the story behind the Indian Pale Ale.
Okay.
Well, the story is that what was it? Indian or English boats carrying, like, how you distill Indian Pale Ale is it has to travel from Britain to India and back or something like that.
Now,
But
check
it's,
it out. I'm not even a historian. I don't know this shit.
Okay.
All right. So, India Pale Ales, they're more hoppy,
Yeah.
right? That means there's more hops in them. They have a longer fermentation process, and they'll stay longer.
Okay.
So when you leave England or whatever fucks up here,
Mm.
you go down around the Horn.
Yeah.
You remember you had to go around the Horn
Well, that's what I'm
to
saying.
get to India. So it takes a long ass time, and so the old pale ales would go stale halfway through the trip,
Mm.
and the
So
sailors
they
would
have to
drink
make them
more.
hoppier to
So they had to make-
survive. Yeah.
So that's why they have an India Pale Ale,
Okay.
because it's made to make the distance all the way to
See,
India.
I knew the trip was part of it. There's
Mhm.
actually, I've got another story about that too. There is a Nordic, oh fuck, I can't remember which country it was. I think it was Norway. All right, so Norway, they distilled this liquor of theirs
Okay.
through this process that is still to this day the process of how you make this liquor, and it involves sailing from Norway to Australia and then back.
Why?
And the reason, here's why. When
Because
you
that seems really
so it's,
impractical.
here's a couple of factors. All
Yeah.
right, it's the length of the sail. All right,
Alright.
it's a long time, longer fermentation process. Here's another factor. When you're sailing all over these zones of the Earth,
Yeah.
you're crossing a lot of different climate zones, and that has a very unique
temperature,
interesting-
right?
You're crossing the hemispheres too. So like when you're in Norway, you're in like the north.
Yeah.
And when you go to Australia, you're on the other side of the equator, so you're in a completely different season.
Okay.
Like if it's winter in Norway, it's gonna be summer. Like when you make it to Australia, because
Right.
that's how it works, right? They're,
Yeah. No.
they have, they have,
on the opposite side
they
of
have
the hemisphere.
polarized. Yeah, we have polarized.
That's why Australia's
seasons.
got summer when we're, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not Australia. Yeah,
Because
Australia.
of the axis.
Yeah.
Like this is roughly how this works. Yeah, we're tilted, and so we have like the different seasons depending on where you're at in the hemisphere. But so you have to sail to Australia, and then if you sail back, so the story is I think they were transporting a ship full of this specific liquor that they were distilling.
Right.
And it made it-
Norwegian.
Yeah, some Norwegian thing, which they make all
Wait,
sorts
were they
of
going
stuff.
from Norway or to Norway?
They were going from Norway to Australia.
Okay.
They made it to Australia, and they were like, "Hey, we got your cargo."
That's an
and they're
Australian
like-
accent.
they're like-
They're Norwegians.
And the Australians are like, hey, "Fuck off, we don't want you." Like,
Right.
"Fuck off, mate." And so they're just
Did Australians
they're like,
exist
"Fine,
there?
we'll take our liquor all the way back to Norway. You guys can go screw yourselves."
Right. And they
so,
tasted better after this,
And so yeah, well they taste.
or they just kept doing it.
Well, they
because
brought
that's
it
how
back.
do
So yeah, they brought it back, and they were like, "Wow, this is really unique." I don't know what was unique about the liquor. It just it gave it some unique flavor.
Well, it's the temperature, right?
Well, yeah, it's the temperature fluctuations because it's like it's sitting in the cargo
Yeah,
hold of some
yeah.
ship as it's like crossing all these different sorts of like climates,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's all sorts of different temperatures that are affecting it too, and so
Huh.
it's really unique. I don't know, it's really cool. It's interesting to like know these kind of
Well,
things.
see, it's kind of like it's bar trivia almost, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where the fun stuff in history comes in. Now most people don't enjoy that fun stuff. See, now on the same, because history's your buff, right?
Yeah.
And so for me it'd be physics and like science and all that kind of mathematics.
Yeah.
That's where the fun stuff is for me, you know. So it's what was it, like the bicycle tire trick? Were you ever done that one? Did I ever show you that?
No.
No, because like, okay, so I learned this changing tires on my bikes as a kid. Is you could
That's how you find
axle.
out where the hole is, right?
No. It's a fun like physics trick.
Oh,
The
okay.
gyroscope effect.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you take your finger and you hold onto the axle and you spin the tire really fast, right? And then you hold your finger under the axle and the tire's hanging off, but it's spinning really fast, and you can put your finger under one side and it'll stay upright. Because it's a gyroscope, it'll start rotating in this direction.
Oh, okay.
It's called precessing. But what's happened? It's all physics, and you can go all day into how and why it works. But it's a neat little, like, not magic trick, but it's just a science trick you can try at home kind of thing.
So why do you like that? Why does it amuse you?
Simple brain, I guess. I don't know. Hang on, what? So for me, I can't actually explain why I found that interesting as a kid, other than, wow, I learned this. I discovered something. It's kind of like maybe the first people that discovered
You discovered
fire.
something about the Earth, maybe.
Well, it's
a thing.
the Earth. It's physics and the universe.
That's
That's
how
just
the
it
universe works. Yeah.
What's funny is now I can apply that to the job that I like. We use gyroscopes all the time,
Yeah.
and understanding precession and how it all works. Like it's all something. If you have this root understanding of it, it's cool when you relearn it again.
Yeah.
And so I figure it's the same for history, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I like history. It's how it's how people work. Like
Right,
history.
actually, it's sociology more or psychology.
Well,
maybe?
that's the thing that I like about history is history kind of encompasses everything. Like if you learn history, you even learn about physics. Because like
Right.
if you learn about the period of like the scientific enlightenment is what they call it, like the time of like Newton and Galileo and stuff like that.
And there's a
You're
whole
learning
bunch
how
of
the scientific method was founded. So for me, I'm not super into biology. I appreciate those
Of course,
fields.
yeah.
I don't really like them in the sense that I don't like studying them.
Well, you're not
but
gonna follow into the depths of it, but
I'm not an expert. I
on
don't
a
want to
surface
become
level,
an
you're like, hey,
expert.
that's cool. I agree, it's a good thing.
I
and then
appreciate them.
Yeah.
I appreciate them from a historical perspective.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
before we had the scientific method, we kind of took the world. We understood the world
They burn people
always
with the
within
cross a
the
lot.
yeah no. It was, we tried to understand the world from like a biblical perspective. We tried to understand how the world fit into like God's world.
Right.
The scientific method was significant because we were like, all right, now we're going to try to find a way to explain the world without using the sequence because God did X.
Right. Yeah. Well, it was actually it's cool that history point, because at that point now you're free. You simply say, why is this, and not try to apply something like some sort of pre-mentioned evidence. You simply say, here's an idea I have, using only things that I can test and prove. Why is this true?
Yeah.
And that's where really shit started to actually take off.
Because you're arguing points using evidence,
And
and
logic.
you're making conclusion using evidence. And the reason why historians appreciate the scientific method for those reasons is because history is supposed to be done that way.
Right.
So that comes back to the date.
Supposed
That
to
comes
be.
back to the date memorization thing. The reason why date memorization is not doing history is because that would be like just simply putting out data points and like calling that like science. No, science is the interpretation of data.
Oh, that's a damn good analogy right there.
History is the interpretation of dates.
Yeah.
So, for
'cause you still
Columbus,
need that
Columbus
it's like-
sailing the ocean in 1492
Yeah.
is only significant in the narrative that you put it in. And so
Yeah.
there's tons of different narratives that you can fit that in. The most common one that was used for a long time was Columbus sailing the ocean in 1492 was the beginning of God's divine plan of America.
Right.
That was the beginning of
That was America.
the white man holding, reign over America, and that's the reason why you have Columbus Day,
Right.
is because that was like the beginning of the European dominion over the American continent.
Well, which eventually became, a rebellion on its own. But that's a cool. Hang on, just going back, because that's where I'm still. This is the part that excites me. It's almost when you take that data and how you analyze it.
Yeah.
So yeah, like just
So it's all
having
about the
dates-
analysis. It's
Yes,
all about the
analysis.
conclusions that you draw
Here's the scary part: is that you can take multiple points of data and you can analyze it
in different
in all
perspectives.
sorts of fucked up ways.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
historians love.
Right?
That's what that's one thing that history is now. That's the way that we're like moving towards teaching history is
Okay.
from a perspective point of view, which is troublesome to some people.
Well, it can be,
because
but
it's troublesome because for a lot of people they understood that history is like it's supposed to be one
It's a
story.
linear. They're like, this is the story.
They're
it's a
like,
linear
no,
story.
these are the facts.
Right,
Like,
but here's the thing: is you take that same story. What happened, like when Columbus came and he found America? From
Yeah.
our point of view, that we've always been taught in books, yeah, that's awesome. But you look
Yeah.
at it from like the Indian, the Native
Yeah.
American, it's like that was the beginning of the apocalypse.
seriously, no,
It was a shithole. Like
yeah, that was the
people
end of
started
their
dying of
societies.
diseases and all sorts. So you
Mhm.
look at it from two different viewpoints, two different perspectives, and it becomes two very, very different stories. Even though it's the same story, it's just
Yeah.
It's,
So, and one of the questions that's always relevant is which story is the most compelling? Like, why should we believe? Because you can't avoid narratives. Like, you can't avoid putting facts into like a sequence where it tells a story.
right.
Like, it's troublesome to do that because you start to like maybe a bias comes into play. Like when you're creating a narrative, there's a bias. Like if you're arguing that Columbus just fucked up the natives and he just killed the
when you
natives,
try to make
you're
one
ignoring
point.
how if you just paint like Columbus coming to America as totally bad for natives, you're ignoring the societies that took place afterwards, such as like the Spanish colonizing Americans, our America,
Right.
which like that. I'm not trying to justify Columbus. It's just
No,
that
well,
like
I mean, it's just what it was at this point.
Yeah.
You can't, you shouldn't have to justify facts, things that did happen.
yeah,
You can only have a viewpoint on them. Now, it's kind of a crazy thought that came into my mind though, is that you were saying recently they started doing this, right?
recently started doing that.
The whole perspective based.
Yes,
analysis
it's
of
it's
history.
very strong on perspectives. Yeah,
Right, but that's definitely, even when I went through high school, that's not how it was.
Yeah, because now we're starting to look more at primary sources, like firsthand accounts of it. So
Okay.
like we didn't even do you know what a primary source is? I mean, we talked
Well-
about it in, like that college course.
But
In high school, there's
I can deduce really quickly from our conversation what a primary source is and a first-hand account. I know what a first-hand. So it's like, yeah, now they're taking eyewitnesses essentially.
Yeah.
Of the history. So, but here's the weird tie-in. All right, it's you remember movies back in the '80s? Here we go back on movies.
okay.
They were like, you remember the good guys always wore white and shit, or like we can go even further back.
Oh,
than
you're
that.
talking about like tropes and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
tropes.
Okay.
But you have like the good guy. Well, it was just more simply for the longest time, movies were simple. Bad guys were bad guys,
Mhm.
and good guys were good. So a good guy had a character,
Yeah.
and the bad guys were just evil for no given reason. They were just evil and bad.
Two-dimensional. Yeah.
Two-dimensional, very simple.
They're
Now,
not human, yeah.
in the last like 8 years or so, 10 years, I'd say,
Mm.
movies and shows. So the example being like Game of Thrones. There's not really I mean, there kind of are bad.
Yeah,
people,
yeah. Well, like especially in the books, they try to avoid the whole good-bad dichotomy.
Right. No, it's just simply everybody has their own history and their own perspective, and
Mm.
everybody's going for the same goal. But then when you look at it from this person's perspective, yeah, that person is bad against them.
Mm.
And then you look at it from over here, now that person, they're both just living their lives. And so it's almost like in this we've had this growth, this understanding where we need to teach people, even at a younger age, that people aren't just evil for the sake of being evil.
Mm.
Usually they have their own driven points and reasons and all that for doing what they do. Because that's what makes a person real, is that you don't just wake up one day. Some people do, unfortunately. There's a small little fraction of people I figure that do.
I guess it's the idea that like evil people, everyone that we consider like evil was more or less like they all thought they were doing like the right thing. Like Hitler thought he was doing the right thing.
Right. And
But-
that's a fucked up...
But that was because he had a fucked up definition of the right thing.
Right, but and here's... That's probably a mental trip. I bet you could do that I bet you there could be a course. A college course or something. Where you do that whole devil's advocate thing and you try to view the world through like Hitler's eyes or some shit and try to not justify by any means, because what he did was fucked up, but
Oh, you try to like understand.
yeah,
Yeah. In my opinion, any time that you talk about Hitler, you should be doing that.
right.
You should be. I mean, I don't think it's too hard to like. It's it's definitely, it's not like we should be worried about like kids like accidentally falling under the spell of Hitler. No, it's like his ideas were so zany, like from our perspective.
Here's the thing is,
and it's important you need to understand why Hitler thought the way he did in order to understand that time period.
More importantly is understanding what drives a person to do some shit like that, some crazy shit.
Yeah.
Probably is going to keep things from not happening in the future. You know, it's like they understand the drives, I can't think of any of them off the top of the head, but like the kids who come to school with guns and shit. At first they're like, oh, he's crazy. Now they're like, well, there's probably a list of factors that all led to this dude doing some crazy shit.
Yeah.
And so they try to cut down on those factors now and create this environment where it won't produce mass serial killers. Good thing. You know, let's not just point them out and kill them. Let's stop them from ever evolving in the first place. You know?
That's an interesting example because, like, I think a lot of times that kind of reminds me of something else that's true in history, and that is that a lot of times there are some things that you could never know. Like, so for some of these kids who shoot up schools, for example, I mean, like, the media and experts, psychological experts, will try to figure out the exact motivation of their attacks. But you know what? One thing that I've learned in social science, like studying social sciences, people are crazy.
Some people are crazy,
people
right?
are irrational, and when people are irrational, when you try to like figure out their logical sequence of thoughts, like how they did whatever they did,
right?
A lot of times, just the extent to which people are just irrational, like, can really screw with with figuring out why they actually did certain things, and so. And that's something that scientists, right? So that idea that there are some things that maybe we'll perhaps never be able to confirm. Like, you'll always have theories. You'll have like strong theories as to why you believe something, but in history, in theoretical physics, there's just some things that are almost like they're unanswerable. However, you can always perfect that theory as to why you think a certain thing.
Well, I mean, to the same degree, the theory of evolution, for example, or the Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
You can't ever truly confirm something like that because it's such a vast thing.
But so far we've been getting closer.
That's the thing, yeah.
We've been kind of, something's good. Like, it's usually it's safe to rest on something when like you're pretty much just like continuing to confirm
exactly.
it.
Like as you go deeper into science,
like gravity. Like we're understanding. For a long time, we just kind of accepted gravity as a thing, and then Einstein comes along and he explains how gravity more or less works on like a cosmic scale. Yeah. And even that
which is exciting stuff, you know.
It was. I mean, people didn't even believe it at first. Like the theory of relativity, is that relativity?
I believe that's
relativity.
That's actually one of them that works.
That was
one too.
That was one of his. That was one of the things that he published stuff on. And at first, there was a lot of concern in the scientific community over it.
Okay, so there's one of them. I think it's the theory of relativity. There's actually an equation. Oh, remember? Okay, that's what it was.
Oh, the E equals mc squared.
Yeah,
what is that? What is that even related to?
Energy equals mass. C is the speed of light. So mass times the speed of light squared. Anyways, but so what's going on with that is that there was always a filler. There was like a gap that they were missing. Okay, and they basically filled that gap because it was that dark matter or whatever. I don't know if you ever heard or remember any of that.
Somewhat. I'm like somewhat briefed on it.
Yeah. So there's like
I took a class.
Yeah, it's close. All right. So, and once again, I'm going on some fuzzy memories here. Don't use this stuff every day, so I've injected some of that. But nonetheless, there was an equation to make it all work. They had to just interject like this antimatter into the mix of the universe, of the equation, because they started doing this math. And they're like, wait a minute, if we add up all these supposed masses of all the stars and all this, things don't weigh what they should.
So there's like a missing variable?
Yeah, there's a missing variable.
There's
so
like
they just
an X they have to solve for?
Yeah, so they basically put an X in place. Yeah. Right, in the equation.
That's what dark matter is?
And that's what later on, we're talking like 100 years later, in the Large Hadron Collider, they finally were able to make that, and they measured this X material, this antimatter, and they're like, holy shit, it's exactly what it should have been. Like, they just put a place filler of some specified number.
Does that have anything to do with the quark? I remember. Like,
no, quarks are different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
but that was something that they had learned more about during.
That also, yeah. There's a lot of quarks. You get down on the It's more of a chemist. Well, it's physics too. But yeah, no, that's just another chapter.
But you know what? It's awesome because it's just like history in the sense that there's a lot of things that we do know about the past, but there's a lot of things we don't know about the past too, and we'll never know for sure.
Well, so here's the kind of question is, you know how they stated it? There's the one where they simply talk about how if you write history to be something like whatever's the loudest thing that is written down, that's what history becomes. Whether that was actually what happened or not. But let's say you're writing a book, and the book is supposed to be the book of history, everything that ever happened.
Yeah.
And somebody gets in there like, well, instead of walking in this door, I actually didn't. Well, they did walk in the true fact of what happened, the guy walked in the door.
Okay.
But in the book it was written, no, I didn't walk in that door. You know, what actually happened.
So
it's a philosophical. Well, we can. There's a million different examples of it, but yeah.
I mean, yeah, you're never gonna like have one book on history. It's like historians often base their assessments like through multiple accounts. They accounts. It's about I think corroboration is what they call it.
But here's the thing: what if the majority of accounts that they look up actually have incorrect facts?
They have like they have conflicting facts, like
not even conflicting. No. Let's say like for example propaganda.
Okay.
And it's propaganda to the point where somebody wants this message to be heard, and even though it's not something that ever happened, they just keep saying, no, I did that, and everybody's like, no, he totally did that.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, like, no, factually, if you were to go back in a time machine and watch what this person did, it wasn't that. But 30,000 accounts all say yes, and there's only one person that's like, nope, that's not what went down. As history is written, it's
you know what, that does happen. Yeah, all the time.
That's it. I mean, that's
in
like
fact,
a fault, right?
all right. I got a little fun history thing. The Boston Massacre.
Yeah.
So like, you remember the Boston Massacre, right?
Yeah.
You remember that? All right. So that was that thing that happened before the American Revolution.
Oh, the Boston.
All right.
Okay. Yeah.
So have you ever seen that one old tapestry thing where it's like the 5 British dudes who are like lined up with their muskets, and then there's like people like dying, and they're just like.
I'm legitimately mixing up the Boston Massacre with the Boston Tea Party.
Yeah.
Because all I'm imagining is the ships and the dudes dumping tea off their ships. Yeah.
Oh, this is a big no-no. I'm forgetting which one happened first.
See, here's what I'm going to do before the next... Because this would be a great time that we could be like, hey, Rob, look up that thing and put it on the thing.
Well, what I wish, too, is that we could, like, show that actual graphic of, like, the Boston Massacre.
Yeah.
Because there's a picture that's in like every history book on the Boston Massacre, and therefore it's kids when they think of the Boston Massacre, should they ever like burden themselves with thinking about such a horrible thing.
Obviously you have, so there's that.
Countless times. They will most likely think of this picture, and I'll describe the picture for you. Okay, this was a image that was created by a colonist, an American colonist after the event. It depicts like 5 British soldiers just firing on a crowd, and it looks like it's just basically like it's a massacre.
I do vaguely remember I remember hearing about it in books, so I'm just gonna roll with it.
The Boston Massacre was first. In fact, if I remember correctly, the Boston
checker over here.
The Boston Massacre resulted in Boston Harbor being shut down, which angered the colonists, and they dumped the tea in response.
3 fucking years later? Dude, I'm getting Rob an intercom. Yeah. I am definitely hooking up some audio,
Because I don't know.
That's gonna...
But anyways, back to the Boston Massacre. The reason... So how this ties in with what we were talking about earlier with, like, propaganda and, like, historians, how they sift through it. Here's the thing, is for a long time, the narrative that British troops just mercilessly fired in on this crowd was like the predominant narrative of the Boston Massacre. For a long time, people in America remembered the Boston Massacre. Historians remembered it as this like just terrible time when like these bastard British soldiers like fired upon this crowd for no reason, basically. Yeah. But now, in like relatively in like the last few decades or so, it's starting to be taught more that actually like what happened was basically a crowd, like a group of British soldiers were being harassed by like a giant mob. Like,
Okay.
not just so, like, it wasn't that they fired on, like, a handful of people. No, it was actually, like, a street full of people were harassing these, like, British soldiers and throwing rocks at them, even. And that caused one British soldier to fire on them.
Yeah.
Which then prompted the commander to, like, instruct the rest of them to fire on some of the people in that riot to disperse them. Now, that's, like, a lot more different. That's a little bit more complicated of an event, right? Because
right,
essentially that's like they're almost being provoked, right? I mean, if you and like several other soldiers were being like surrounded by like a hostile crowd of people and you had like rocks being thrown at you, I mean, maybe you wouldn't fire the shot, but like you could understand why they felt so threatened, more or less.
I get, so this is
it changes the narrative from like a group of soldiers just like, you know, like preying on these four defenseless people.
Well, because so Davis, you remember the Davis spray down?
Yeah,
that wasn't the same deal that happened though, because they were being assholes.
Well, I mean that's a very similar event. All right, you know what? No, that is. Let's roll on that for a second.
No, we could take any not any one of them, but there's quite a few recent, like the cop shootings.
Yeah.
Or not cop shooting, but the cops shoot some dude. Right, and I've seen quite a few of them online. They're like, "This is a tragedy." And I'm like, "Well, wait a minute. The dude pulled a gun and was pointing at the cop, and then he gets shot.
Yeah.
What did you expect?"
Well,
that kind of thing. You know, it's like so.
The Davis example is good.
It's probably better because here's why
it's better. The Davis example is a good parallel to the Boston massacre because when I think of the Davis incident, there's a picture. It's a picture instantly comes to mind.
There's the spray.
And it's that guy. It's the way. What makes me crack about that picture
became a meme, which is awesome.
It's a meme because like the way that officer is like walking and it's like that's his like routine thing. He's like, oh, it's 2:00, time to
walk by and spray
pepper spray some hippies. You know, just like it looks like that's just like a typical Tuesday for him.
Which could be,
but it's the way it's. I mean,
dude, imagine having that job, pepper spraying hippies for a living.
Well, so you're a videographer. You've done photography.
Right.
You know that it's all the main goal of photography is you're framing the shot because a shot can tell a story, right?
Yes, but here's the biggest trick to photography.
Mm-hmm.
It's the moment.
Yeah.
You can have the shittiest camera, you can have the worst angle because you can crop that shit down.
It's all about the moment, though.
You have to have your camera on you and ready in the moment. That's the key. All right. Anyways, continue. I could go on with that for days, but
it's what moment you like. I mean, if someone had captured a moment where maybe like, because my understanding of that story, I'm not super well versed on that story, but my understanding is that the police officer did warn them countlessly.
Right, well, so
he was like, "You guys are in the spray zone. Like, if you don't get the hell,
if you don't move away,
if you don't move out of the spray zone."
He said this for like half an hour, probably repeatedly, and they're just like, "No, we're not moving." It's like, okay, well,
I don't know. I almost don't even want to get too much into it because, like, if that is the story, then I'm not even cool with that because, like, you shouldn't. It's not like they shouldn't have a spot that they could protest. And it's almost like
yes and no, but here's the thing: there are lines you have to draw. All right, so let's say
because it's private property. There's,
it's private.
There's
so of course, in that one, it's kind of a blurry line, but using the same principles and standards. Let's say you go to a bank, and you're like, I'm just gonna walk wherever I want. They're like, you can't walk back by the safe. They're like, well, I can do whatever I want. I'm American. Well, no, you can't walk back by the safe because it's private. You're getting near people's money. And they're going to warn you. They're going to be like, hey, if you walk there, we're probably going to punch you in the face, take you down, and handcuff you.
But there's students at a UC. Like,
yes,
UCs are public, though.
I understand that. But once again, when it comes to be a tense, when you have a lot of people possibly getting ready to get wild, you have to draw lines.
Yeah.
Right? Because you start having people step beyond it, get wild. That's how riots happen. So they're trying to... It's essentially a pre-riot control because when people start pushing boundaries, they start pushing, they're like, hey, we're going to push back.
Aha! So you have a problem with the American Revolution. By that logic, you could defend the British soldiers who fired upon that crowd because they were also dealing with a crowd that was literally like what those officers at UC Davis were trying to avoid was happening.
What was happening? Yeah,
in Boston.
Using that logic. Now, of course, I could come at it from the opposite standpoint, where it's like they keep pushing boundaries on us. They keep pushing boundaries. Like, come on, man! Like, you can't just square us into the small. Like, either way has an arguable point. That's why shit becomes really blurry.
Yeah.
You know, this history.
You have to make up your own mind on it. You have to critically think, oh no, we
No.
have to think for
Okay,
ourselves.
but here is the worst part: is for me, if you were to say make up your mind right now, I'd go, I do not have enough facts on that subject. I don't know.
And that's history. That's part of history, is getting the facts. Research is a big part of it.
Right. Well, and here's this kind of takes it into a different realm, but you know how they have there's the effect where people tend to follow those that seem so sure of themselves.
Okay.
This would be one to look up. I can't remember the
Are you
name of it.
talking about where they select information that's like, all right, okay, never mind.
No. No, this is the one where the less intelligent people tend to lead more intelligent people. Because more intelligent people question themselves. They're going, I think I know what's right, but I'm not entirely sure, so I'm not going to make a decision.
Are you talking about confidence, like the role that, like...
Yeah, the
less,
one where less intelligent but extremely confident people end up becoming leaders.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's the extreme example is that people will get led off a cliff because they're like, this is the fucking way to go, and they're like, are you sure? And they're like, I know it. And they don't know shit. They're just like, I know it. And
it's true. You know what?
People who are way more intelligent, who are looking at the map, are like, well, I don't know. There could be a cliff there. There could not. It's a little blurry. But they're like, he seems to really know, so I'm going to follow him. And it's not a circular logic problem, but it is a interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, no, it's true. Like, I mean, I'm all for critical thinking, but yeah, you know what? In moments where you have a bunch of people where they're like, what the fuck do we do? And you have someone who's super confident, they're like, I know what we need to do.
Then
I'm like,
tend to
I always have an inclination where I'm like, hey, he's got it figured out. Let's just roll with his plan. Because I sure as hell don't want to be the one to like call the shots.
Right, I used to do that, and then there was a certain point where I'm like, I do a quick assessment. I'm like, what has this person done? What's their intelligence level?
Yeah.
And it depends, because there's some people, especially in like the field of work that I'm in, I've met people super mellow, super cool. They're fucking smart. At least in this particular field. They've been doing it for 20 plus years. They just know things, right? For that, I follow.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, I would
but,
too.
Yeah, granted.
If you can spot expertise in a field, then yeah.
Right, seems intelligent. So then the other one, though, is there's times where in a much less professional setting, usually, where I'm out and they're like, I know what the fuck's going on. I'll throw out some random shit. And I'm like, I don't know. This guy seems like a dumb fuck.
And that's an important skill to be able to do that.
Not that I'm always right. By no means. I'm just, you know.
Of course. It's your best guess, though. You got a hunch.
Best guess. But the trick is
a
to
red flag.
quickly kind of identify, is this person more or less intelligent than me? Right? And then, if they're less intelligent, then you fucking think for yourself. If they're more intelligent, you still think for yourself, but you think a little less for yourself. Because they might know something you don't. You know, you just add it to the equation.
I mean, I always defer to expertise.
It's smart.
Yeah.
I think that it's not smart. It's wise.
It's wise.
You know the old story, right? The ladder story.
No.
All right. So there is a guy. This is one that our dad told me, at least. I don't know. Maybe he never told you.
Maybe.
Sorry.
That bastard.
Right. Selective knowledge. So there's a guy, right? And there's this ladder. The ladder's got like 5 rungs, and then there's a missing rung. Okay? And so one guy, he climbs up the ladder, hits the missing rung, fucking misses his hand, falls on the ground. Okay? This is the fool. He gets up, he's like, man, that sucked. So he goes to the ladder and starts climbing again. Misses the rung, hits the ground again. Like, keeps doing this. Then there's the smart man, right? He walks up to the ladder, looks at it, he starts climbing, misses the rung, hits the ground, he's like, shit, that sucked. Gets back to the ladder, he's like, wait, there's a missing rung here. He goes past it and climbs on up. Then there's the wise man who sees this other guy fall off the ladder. He walks up to the ladder, starts climbing it. He's like, wait a minute, this guy just fell off. So he skips the rung.
Okay.
Right, so the idea is learn from other people's mistakes.
There's only 2 guys, right?
3 guys. What
3
the
guys.
fuck?
So there's a second guy.
Wise man,
Yeah.
smart man, and the fool.
So the smart man
Makes the mistake once.
Oh, okay. I see. Ah.
Yeah. The fool makes the mistake, keeps making the mistake. The smart man makes the mistake once, learns from his own mistakes.
Okay.
The wise man learns from other people's mistakes and never makes his own. That's the theory here.
Man, so who's the guy who just like is climbing the ladder, sees the missing rung, and is like, oh.
He's the
weird.
fool.
No, I'm saying, and then sees a missing rung, and it's
Okay.
just like,
It's a fucking analogy. Like, there's more, there's other examples, you know? More complex examples in life. You ever dated somebody who was kind of stupid, and you're like, oh, that was a dumb idea, and then later on in life, you go date somebody who's stupid again? Yeah.
No comment.
So, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, you can learn from these examples. Like, it's not always as clear as you see a ladder with a missing rung. Yeah. That's my point.
I think I would be. I think I would miss the wrong. I think that's just funny. That's just like such a extreme.
Well, it's a
display.
simplification. It's like a Chinese proverb. They make it really simple.
It's the latter proverb. The
Yeah.
missing rung.
Ancient Conry proverb right there.
The ancient Condry proverb of the ladder.
Mm-hmm. Now, I remember that shit. That's something from... God, I think Pops told me that when I was like 7 years old.
Learning from
Good
other
stuff.
people's mistakes, though. So that's relevant to history.
All right.
Because so that that one quote, the those who do not learn from history are inclined to repeat or
Repeat
something
history.
like that.
So once
Yeah.
and let's take a broader stance. This whole ladder bullshit that I just told you. Same thing.
Yeah, it's funny though, because like a lot of people who study history don't learn from it though. Like,
Really?
Hitler studied history. He was
Was
like
he a history buff?
he was a Napoleon buff. He idolized Napoleon in a
Okay.
weird way. There's a picture of Hitler, like standing on the above like the balcony part of like Napoleon's tomb
Yeah.
in Paris, and he's basically being like, "What's up, dude? I took your city, or I took your country, man. Like,
Yeah.
I have surpassed you." And then he did the same thing that Napoleon did. He invaded Russia during the winter, or he tried to besiege like the core of Russia during winter, which is stupid. Like, because besieging is all about like
Yeah.
it's basically a battle of resources, and the Russians don't
The
they
Russians
don't
know
give you
what's
they don't
on
give
in
you
winter.
shit. They'll burn their own resources if that means that you can't have it.
Smart move. Well, so and recently a lot of militaries do that too. They'll have the self-destruct button.
Mm-hmm.
You drop a helicopter, you drop a tank, you
It's
blow
all
it up.
about resource. That's modern
not a
warfare
button.
down. That's kind of one of the most like pre-modern warfare was all about mobilization. Current modern warfare is a lot about resources.
Mhm.
It's often the motivation for warfare.
Well, and technology is a resource.
Technology is a resource. It's like, I mean, if you have better technology than other people, if you can like resupply better, that's a huge factor.
Yeah.
So a bunch of military bullshit.
Well, which is,
But
it's
the fact is
historical, yeah.
that people do not learn from history, even though we are constantly talking about like how important it is to learn from
It's
history.
generally so most people don't, right? Because obviously some people learn from history, right? I mean,
So what is there to learn from history? I mean, I mean, it depends. I guess what I'm trying to argue is it's like, is it important to, I don't know where I'm going with this exactly.
dude, there's well, I mean,
There's
that's-
because
you
we were
start
talking
throwing
about
questions like
we're
that.
talking about all these different perspectives. So if there's tons of my point that I'm trying to like make, but I'm like I'm walking up and doing is there's tons of different perspectives in history. So
Yeah.
if there's tons of different narratives, if there's tons of different stories in history, is there a lesson that can be learned from
Oh,
history?
hell yeah.
There's
Hell
tons
yeah.
of different lessons. There's almost
So you're-
conflicting lessons.
well,
There's infinite lessons from
That's
history.
yeah. I wouldn't say
'Cause there's
conflict.
infinite perspectives.
There's no such thing as conflicting lessons, but I would say that in my
Kind of. I mean, there can be
They can-
conflicting
you know,
lessons.
they can't, but here's so I'd like to actually hear that if there is, because that to me, there's no such thing as too much knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you can't learn too much.
Well, yeah, but you can have different perspectives on the way to do something. Like, all right.
But that's what you've learned too much. I mean,
No, it's not a matter of learning too much. It's, well, the idea that there could be conflicting perspectives on how to do things, it's like kind of like it explains politics right now. I mean, the two, like, it explains like partisan differences almost in this sense.
I'm
all
listening.
right? So, like, Democrats tend to favor bigger government as the solution to things, whereas
Okay.
Republicans argue that smaller government is like the solution to things. And each of them will use they'll use a historical narrative to explain their vision, like
Yeah.
like Democrats will say that like like FDR, you know, like using social programs was what got America in a position where it could eventually do, you know, like World War II, and then eventually the economy takes off. But they frame FDR in kind of like a savior role, and like he helped America through the Depression. And whereas some Republicans would argue that FDR that he didn't really save the country from the Depression at all. That was just like that was the war. And
so, but okay, so not to because
I know it's getting heavily partisan, but like I don't
save
want
that for another one. But to kind of jump into it, you're saying that it's actually not beneficial to understand both sides of that argument.
No, it's not. It's not at all what I'm saying.
Because that's what had me going.
I'm sorry.
Wait, yeah. Because you're saying too much knowledge is a bad thing.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I
don't know. It was throwing me off.
I tried to make a complicated point and like wasn't able. No, that's definitely not what I'm trying to say is that there is no one lesson to get from history because you'll always be able to create like another
be able to find another, yeah.
You'll be able to fit facts into a different narrative that contradicts that. Like the reason why I stupidly like went into politics when talking about history is because
give yourself some credit.
No, it's funny. Like Democrats
but...
and Republicans, people on either side of the ideological aisle, I guess you could say, like people on both sides will both use like history to fit their narrative.
Yeah, because it's a tool. Now anything you can usually use to apply your own.
Yeah.
It's just a tool for argument.
So
if you twist it in your particular direction you want to go.
Yeah, I mean like so LBJ. All right. Did you ever learn about the Great Society?
I did. I just don't.
Okay, that was it. Was like Lyndon Baines Johnson. He was the guy who escalated us in Vietnam. He also had an idea to like he started the war on poverty. All right. So he forwarded a lot of social programs to cut poverty. He expanded Medicaid as a way of like providing health care to elderly people. Democrats hail him as like someone who did a lot for helping disadvantaged people in society.
Right.
At the same time, I've heard Paul Ryan, you know, the Speaker of the House.
Kind of snivelly one, yeah.
He's pointed. He actually he's argued that the war on poverty was like one of the biggest contributors to poverty in America because essentially it thwarted the private sector's ability to be able to combat poverty and stuff like that.
Both use the same. They use the same point
to argue
opposite points.
Their point, yeah. There's different perspectives on it.
The same historical.
Now, I would definitely argue that each side probably does, like one side definitely does a better job of arguing their case. I'm not going to go into what side that is.
We're not diving in because I'm trying to.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into politics.
I don't even know. I don't know that issue well enough to describe each side. But the point is, I think it's just interesting though that like people can have they can interpret events in entirely different ways.
Right.
And it has to do with their worldview. And so that's the reason why like history is all about like a perspective thing now because you have to understand the worldview of people that through which you're studying like a historical event like.
And that's where it gets complicated now.
Yeah.
It's almost like we're diving off into a whole other realm.
Mm-hmm.
But what is it? It's Friday. It's getting late.
It's getting late.
Yeah, we've been running this thing for almost an hour now.
Yeah.
So I think it's about time to wrap it up.
Let's do it. I'm definitely tired of talking about history.
Yeah, fuck history.
Fuck history up the ass.
Yeah, ooh.
Yeah.
Kind of intense. To that, another great show in the bag.
All right.
Let's do it again next Friday.
Let's do it again next Friday.
All right.
Founders talking.